welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I'm thrilled to have Gill Alexander on the show. You probably know him as the host of A Numbers Game at VSIN, but he is also a very well-established tennis handicapper. Gill, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ed. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for doing this. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, as 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. Gill, I would love to know more about your process for handicapping tennis. Give us maybe an overview, obviously without giving away too many secrets, and maybe talk about the metrics that you use to evaluate a tennis match.
Yeah, and let me preface this by saying that while we're recording this, a match is happening that threatens to, how can I put this? Makes me wonder if I know anything anymore. Because we're watching world number one Iga Swiatek, the Queen of Clay, in a dogfight with Naomi Osaka. But to answer your question, Ed, it's very simple. I handicap tennis. First of all, I was a baseball handicapper, and as the years went on, just to give you some background, baseball was always a team sport disguised, an individual sport disguised as a team sport to me. And so I loved handicapping baseball. This is, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 8 years ago. And as baseball changed, and what I mean by that is as starting pitchers were removed from games quicker than they used to be, and even some teams even had, an opener, for goodness sake, my ability to quantify baseball, or at least the way that I did things, lessened because I couldn't wrap my arms around relief pitchers in the same way. So to me, I naturally gravitated over time towards tennis. And for me, quantifying individual sports makes much more sense to my brain than the sort of marriage and the constant flow of team sports. To me, that's more difficult. But with tennis, I was always a huge tennis fan. I was always fascinated by it. And it's pretty simple what I do in tennis. And by the way, shout out to Dan Weston from England, Dan Weston, who now is very obsessed with cricket. He was sort of my tennis handicapping idol, and I owe him a lot for the inspiration of doing it. Dan Weston was a writer for Betfair and for Pinnacle for many years, talking about tennis. But one of the things that I was so impressed with his handicapping, and I was like, I really want to get into this. So what I do with tennis is I really basically focus on surface per surface, hard courts versus clay versus grass, with a gradation of hard courts, meaning that some hard courts are much faster than others. There are slow hard courts as well, by comparison. And so I take a look at, primarily in terms of just data, I'm looking at pretty basic stuff. I'm not really going crazy. Service points, 1%, return points, 1%, break points, save percentage, because to me that's a function of, sort of the runners in scoring position or the third down conversions of tennis kind of thing. So I'm looking at those kinds of numbers and I'm handicapping from there. And what I will tell you is that as the years go on, these work extremely well for me in hard courts, primarily, far better than it has this year in, say, in clay. Way up on the season in hard courts, down in clay season thus far. And by the way, Naomi Osaka just breaks Iga Swiatek in the third set, just to let people know what we're doing here. This is just unbelievable to me. Yeah.
Right. Excellent. So you are looking at these metrics, service points, so on and so forth. How do you all put that together? And when you're looking at the market?
Well, I'm taking data from various sources, and I am putting that all together. And I'm an Excel sheet kind of guy, so I have
Right.
spreadsheets on all these numbers. I do it 12 month, I do it 6 month, I do it 3 month as well. So I do it based on and then I'm looking at really recent form as well. But I'm weighing 12 and 6 months, quite frankly, Ed, higher than I am anything else. I don't want to be too swayed by recency bias. And then what I do is I produce an actual fair line for each and every tennis match, and also in futures markets, and then I sort of juxtapose against those to trigger or not trigger bets.
Excellent. The surface thing really interests me. So let's say we're looking at the French Open, and pretty soon I'm going to ask you about a bet. Uh, when you're doing that, are you only looking at data based on clay, or will you take a player's performance on other surfaces as well and just weight it less?
With clay, I only look at clay. Um, it is such a different. By the way, clay has gradations as well, too, right? Roland Garros is a much slower surface than some of the earlier run-up tournaments on the clay tour, which comes right after hard courts, the early part of the year. So, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you the answer to your question with grass, for instance, is I do incorporate hard court numbers because grass is not a big enough season. It's not a long enough season to have a meaningful sample size if I just strictly adhere to grass alone. So so I incorporate a lot of fast hard court stuff with that as well.
Awesome. Is there a French Open bet that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I have everything tied in on the ladies. So first of all, I have Iga to win on the ladies side. Now I have a history with Iga. Somewhat
Do
famously,
tell. Do
well,
tell.
in 2020, when she was not really well known, I bet her at 30 to 1, my consensus line, to win the French Open, and she won it. I had her, her numbers from lower tours, from below the main tour, and so she was able to win that. She did it in resounding fashion, and she has won. Um, she's won twice since then as well. So she's won 3 French Opens. She's looking for her fourth here. She turns 23, I want to say, in 2 days, 23 years old. So if she were somehow to win this French Open, then she would kind of be on the Rafa pace. And Rafa Nadal on clay is, I always like to say, is the most dominant thing on sports in our lifetime, no matter the sport.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
so, um, so I have Iga tied in. I also have her parlayed, which I know is verboten to some, but I have her because she is such a strong favorite at this point on the lady side. And I believe in her numbers. Like her raw data is so much superior to anyone else on tour, specifically not only on clay but on this particular in this particular tournament history. Um, I have her with a few guys on the men's side, one with Novak Djokovic, one with Carlitos Alcaraz, one with Casper Ruud, which we can get into here momentarily. But as far as like a bet to make right at the moment, one of the other bets I made is I have Jan Lennard Struff to win the second quarter of quarter number 2 on the men's side. And I got him pre-tournament at 14 to 1. I'm not sure if books post those mid-tournament. They should, because we're only a round in. So they should have those available. But Struff to me is a guy that no one in terms of like sort of how I viewed Iga back in 2020, not a lot of people, I don't think the market is aware of how good his clay numbers are. So to me, if you could find that bet, that would be worth a flyer.
DraftKings seems to have every bet, so I'm certainly going to go look for that. Struff on the men's side to win the second quarter. So as I flip back and forth, I didn't think that we would actually be following some live tennis results while we were recording this. But as you mentioned, Iga Świątek is playing Naomi Osaka. She has an interesting history too, right? Wasn't she the best in the world at one point?
She's won 4 slams. She's the only other person on tour currently that has won 4 slams. Iga being the other. Iga and Naomi. Naomi won all 4 on hard courts. This is before she became a mom. And she was at one point in that moment in time the most dominant tennis player in the world. Um, this is sort of a little before Ash Barty's ascendancy, before Ash Barty retired. So Osaka was a great player. This is not her surface. So that's what makes this, regardless of how this ends up, that's what makes this result so surprising.
Right, right. Yeah, we are actually in the third set right now, and Osaka is up. So we will see how that turns out. Let's talk a little bit about the men's side. Nadal is out, and we now have Carlos Alcaraz as the favorite on the men's side. Although certainly, I pulled him at plus 230 on FanDuel yesterday, so he's the favorite. Novak Djokovic is at plus 380. They're neither of them are as much of a favorite as Swiatek was on the women's side, who I saw at minus 180 yesterday. But how do you think the men's side plays out?
The men's side was very strange heading into Paris because you had a situation where Yannick Sinner, who has been the best 2024 calendar player on men's tennis, period. Yannick Sinner, the Italian, has a hip injury. Hip injuries, and particularly hip injuries at this age, such a young age, are very problematic because, if you talk to like old tennis players, retired tennis players, the most common injury that tennis players have chronically are hips. So it's very concerning that Sinner has a hip injury. So there was question marks around him heading into this tournament. Carlos Alcaraz had an arm problem, arm injury. And then Novak Djokovic got hit on the head with a water bottle in a previous clay tournament. And then he had some uneven performances after that. So, um, that it comes in. So those are the three guys that would be at the top of, and were at the top of the betting market. And so they all come in with question marks. And that was pre-draw even. And then we get the draw and we find out like Novak Djokovic is in the same quarter as Casper Ruud. Casper Ruud, the reason that I have him tied in with Swiatek is he is a two-time finalist. He was a finalist the last 2 years here in Paris. And for whatever reason, he loves this surface as well. Like this is his thing as well. So I think Djokovic and Casper Ruud are headed to a quarterfinal matchup. I think Casper Ruud is very live there. So Djokovic not done any favors with that draw, although he wasn't in the most difficult quarter. Alcaraz did end up in the most top heavy quarter. So it really the long way to answer your question here, Ed, is you really have to do a bunch of injury assessment here early on. Like Novak, even in his first round match, looked a little uneven. Alcaraz dropped a set today, even though he righted the ship. Um, Yannick Sinner, we'll see. We're too early to really have any of these guys tested by good opponents. But I guess my point being is there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's why I think a guy like Casper Ruud, based on the betting line, is actually a pretty good play, not only to win his quarter, like Jan Lennard Struff. Casper Ruud is in Q1, Struff is in Q2, but I think Ruud to win it all is actually a pretty interesting play as well.
Interesting. So Casper Ruud both to win his quarter and to win it all. And a lot of this is just because of the uncertainty on the men's side, these injuries that you talked about. No one seems to be on top of their game, right?
That is correct. Well, I mean, they might be. That's the thing. You don't know. Like it would surprise no one for Novak Djokovic to all of a sudden crush people. It would surprise no one. Pardon me, Ed. Got some volume here all of a sudden. It would surprise no one if Carlos Alcaraz all of a sudden played top form. Same thing with Sinner, but you just don't know. You don't have a sense of the true effect of these injuries. There was a moment there the week before the tournament. We thought a lot of these guys would withdraw, and none of them did. They all decided to give it a go. Nadal, by the way, for being the king of clay, he was never really a threat to win the tournament this time around. Like his peak is long behind, based on injuries, also and age.
Right. Injuries and age. Uh, Gil, I am not a tennis expert, so I'm going to ask you well, Djokovic is also getting up there in age, right? He's
Yes.
been long-term success. How old is he, and how much longer do you expect him to be contending to win these Grand Slams?
Hard to say. As the statement goes, Father Time is undefeated. Novak Djokovic is what now? He just turned 37. And Ed, when you and I were kids, if you were 27, you were long over the hill in tennis.
That's right. That's right.
But Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, and Rafael Nadal, who I like to say are better at tennis than anybody else is at anything. They changed everything. They're tennis gods. They're not just tennis greats. And but 37 is 37. Federer retired at 40. Nadal is now playing. He's at 38. He's going to try to play in the Olympics, and who knows if anything after that. And so, yeah, I think we're in the final bend, if you will. But man, bet against Novak Djokovic at your own risk.
These tennis players, as well as players in other sports, just take care of their bodies so much more than anyone in the prior generation. Is that right? That's
Oh,
got to
for
be a part of
sure,
how? Yeah,
for sure. Like in any sport, yeah.
yeah, like in any sport, right? And there is way more money now in all these sports than there was a generation ago, right? And we see this in soccer with Lionel Messi, who is just kind of embarrassing people in the U.S. right now. But yeah, do you think it's just like, if you can make, what's LeBron going to make next year? Double digit millions of dollars to keep his body in shape. Is it just that financial incentive that is propelling these athletes to be better into their late 30s and maybe even their early 40s?
Is it financial incentive? I mean, yeah, I'm sure that doesn't hurt. It's just the sign of the times, also, right? It's just that the nutrition, and we didn't care about, like, as a society, we didn't care about those things back then. I mean, I can remember your favorite NFL football team; those guys drank all off season, right? And they showed up fat, and they got in shape playing football once training camp started. So, I mean, it's a
Now you get your butt kicked if you
yeah,
do that, right?
that's right. It's a totally different world, and it's completely different worlds, um, and everybody has the top of everything: training, nutrition, everything you can imagine. Sports psychologists, right, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Getting back to tennis, I think Alcaraz and Sinner are some of the more younger guns that may take over the sport as we progress here.
100%.
And yeah, so maybe give us a quick summary of the two of them.
Well, I mean, listen, as the Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer generation, and those guys took all the slams away from any other player who really wanted one. John Isner famously saying, "Those guys are so selfish. Took all those slams from me." Um, yeah, those are the guys. Those are the guys most poised to dominate the game. By the way, shout out to Sasha Zverev as well, who has not won a slam. A lot of people are backing him to win this tournament. He just won in Rome. So he's also a young-ish player. He's not as young as Alcaraz and Sinner, but I would put him on the short list of guys that still have a shot to, make their mark on the men's tennis side. But Alcaraz is special, and Sinner is special. Alcaraz in a way that we haven't really seen, just an all-court game. Maybe his signature shot being unbelievable drop shots. He's not playing at his peak form. I would say that was about a year ago, but I'm sure he'll regain it. But those are the guys that are going to make this an amazing sport for years to come. There is nothing, Ed, in my opinion, that combines physical and mental greatness like tennis does. You're out there on an island. It's just an incredible sport to play, first of all, but to watch. And at this level, it is some of the most incredible things you can witness in sport.
Excellent. And you've just always been a fan for the
Always, my
entirety of your
whole
life?
entire life. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
how did you get it? How did you get into that as a kid?
Just like with any sport, I think this is also different from our generation to today's generation. We used to just change sports as the seasons went. Now, I think if you show acumen in one sport, they like, oh, you got to play football all year round. You got to play basketball all year round. We
Oh
go from
yeah.
football then to basketball, and then when the summer came, I was not a baseball player, and so tennis was always my thing. And I used to love
Got
going
it.
to the DC tour stop and watching guys like Brad Gilbert dominate the event. That sort of thing.
Fascinating. Yeah, there certainly is like a lot of specialization in youth sports now. I see that a lot with my 12-year-old son that plays soccer, and he plays soccer kind of year round at this point. The idea is that you're supposed to kind of diversify and do a lot more things, but I don't know if I see that happening. And it's an interesting thing.
Yeah,
Gill
again,
out
sign of the times.
sign of the times, exactly. I mean, it's crazy how much sports in general has changed since we were kids. Like, watching sports, right?
To the
It's
good, I would argue.
yeah. Well, Why would you say that? Because I mean, I agree with you, but if I were to be a pessimist, I'd be like, well, I don't know, analytics has ruined everything, and
uh,
there's only
well,
strikeouts and homers and corner threes, and so why would you say it's for the better?
Well, because I think everything we have in our toolkit to optimize a sport is ultimately for the better. And you're always going to have naysayers, right? You're always going to have the old school crowd. You know, what you just said about analytics. Aaron Schatz loves to say, he goes, I don't know what it is about the non analytics community where they assume we don't watch games, right? And Aaron is always amused by that because he's like, I watch more games than they do. Right, so it's some for some reason our brain toggles to that default, which is stupid. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I think it's great. You brought up basketball briefly. Is there anything more beautiful than Warriors basketball? I don't think so.
Nope.
You know, a
Yep.
dynasty that won 4 championships probably should have won 6.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
think in many
Well,
ways that dynasty is somewhat minimized, like in history. Like I don't think people great get how great it really was. Um, So I mean, if you don't have that, well, and Steph Curry deserves credit for changing the game, and maybe it took a player like that to be able to optimize that. But I'm just saying, from sport to sport, thank God we have a different way of looking at it now than we did. And otherwise, we'd be shooting 16-foot jumpers. Um, you know, no one will be taking perimeter jumpers, and so it's that's just one sport, but it's across the board.
for sure. I mean, when I grew up watching the Philadelphia 76ers, there was a lot of post up play. And, it was fine. It was just how basketball got played. But then the Warriors really changed everything with just the way they just whipped the ball around and got great shots and was really a history making team. And now I feel like we're in this next era where there's a lot more pick and roll, and guys like Luka Doncic and Jokic are just kind of passing the basketball to an entirely different level, which I think has been super fun to watch. I think that's also an advance for the game. Just the way that this ball goes from one end of the court to the other, and you're like, how did he see that guy? Like
Yeah,
I've played this sport, and I'm like, it's pretty incredible. What you're doing under the pressure that you're under against some of the best athletes in the world, and you're just doing this. So,
I mean, I think
yeah,
basketball may be more than any other sport. Not to switch it to basketball, but you just think about it's funny because we get to see old football games a lot on TV. You get to see old, I don't know, tennis matches even. But for some reason, we don't get to see a lot of 70s basketball on TV or early 80s. Like, I just don't run across it as much. But if you do get to see it, it's fascinating because the way that these guys yo-yo the dribble up court, the speed is so slow.
yeah,
Chrissy Andrews, who's my buddy, who's the
yeah,
runs the sports book at the South Point Hotel Casino, he loves to tell the story that the Supersonics, the Seattle Supersonics of the late 70s, who lost the NBA championship to the Washington Bullets in 1978, but won it against the Bullets in 1979. This is right before Bird and Magic were drafted, when the NBA was probably at its nadir. That Gus Williams and Dennis Johnson, their guards, or maybe it was Gus Williams and downtown Freddie Brown. I think it was Gus Johnson and Dennis Johnson. Gus Williams and Dennis Johnson, pardon me. They used to have a conversation walking the ball up court. Like, it's just such a different game,
right, right,
And so,
yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. Anybody who just blindly says analytics are ruining the game, I'd probably not be interested in that conversation.
Exactly. But I am always interested in a conversation with you, Gill Alexander. Thank you so much for making time to come on my podcast, especially during such an amazing match. Please let everyone know where they can get all your good work.
I am on VSIN, a numbers game. I host a show called Numbers Game. With my producer, Kelly Bidlin. We have fun every Monday through Friday morning, 10 to noon Eastern, 7 to 9 a.m. Pacific. And then I also do the Beating the Book podcast, which is, along with the Betting Dork, used to be my bread and butter prior to the VSIN days. I still do that.
Awesome. And on the Beating the Book podcast, you obviously do these NFL megapods that you're super famous for with your guests. You and Drew Dinsick have been doing a lot of tennis podcasts as well during the off season now.
Yes, we always do slams. We do slams in Indian Wells, which is the de facto fifth slam. We always preview those. But I'll tell you, after Iga loses here, man, I don't know what we know anymore. If she in fact loses this, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And where can people find you on the internet, on the Twitter/X?
Oh, beating the book. Beating the book is my old Twitter handle. I'm still there. Still posting videos. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Hey, yeah, you posted videos of a numbers game. Right? Is that
Yes. Those
awesome?
By posting videos, those are the videos I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, Gil, I do need to thank you for, every time you have me on a numbers game, it is incredible the amount of attention that comes back to my website. You guys do a great show there. You guys deserve all the accolades that you get. It's a fantastic show. I highly recommend that everyone check it out. And again, thank you, because you do drive a lot of traffic my way.
Oh man, thank you, Ed, and thank you for making the time to come on when you do. I appreciate it. I always enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thanks again for coming on, Gil.
Thank you, Ed.
You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I will talk to you again soon.